This story is a living passion. I'm not crashing.
Hello, my name is Beanland and welcome to this week's painting demonstration. It's been a while since I've done one of these demos because I decided to concentrate on painting this year instead of teaching. However, I've had a lot of requests and people subscribing to my YouTube channel, so I thought I'd do another one. But I'm going to do it a little bit differently by explaining more of the pre-painting process. In other words, I'd like to share some of the thinking that I go through before the brush ever hits the paper. First, I'd like to talk about the photo that I used. Here's the original photo. First of all, there has to be something in a photo or a scene that excites me and makes me want to paint it. In this photo, what really attracted me was the wonderful light, the yellow awnings, the umbrellas, and the hustle and bustle of this popular bar. Next comes the very important aspect of taking this photo and using it to create a good composition. When I'm trying a new painting, I almost always do a series of value and compositional studies first, so that I can deal with any problems or issues that the painting presents before I paint it. Here's my first value study, which fairly accurately represents the photo. I like it, but when I ask myself the question, what's the story behind this painting, I realized it's the people and the umbrellas and the awnings. It's not the car and the garage and this other building, so I decided to zoom in. So I did value study number 2, which zoomed right in on the action. But after looking at this, I decided it needed a little more context. I needed to show more of the scene. So I did value study number 3, which is between the other two. And this is the one I decided to go with. Even though, as you'll see when I get started with the painting, I did crop off a little bit of the right-hand side here. Any of these studies could work very well for a painting. And in fact, other people would approach this scene in an entirely different way. Now, also, this may seem like a lot of work, and it is. It took me about 45 minutes to do these 3 value studies, but to me it's time well spent. As I mentioned, when I'm drawing these, I'm already thinking about how I'm going to paint them. I'm recognizing potential problems and planning how to deal with them. So this makes it much easier when I actually start the painting. For me, the bottom line is, however, that when I put in all this work, it always pays off. I'm much freer and more spontaneous when I paint, and the results are always much better. So now I think we will get started. I've kind of done a rough sketch here. I would just like to go over my colors. I'm not sure exactly which ones I'll use, but my standard palette these days is neutral tint, dioxazine purple, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, burnt umber, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, cad red light, cad orange, yellow ochre, and possibly, because there's a lot of yellow in here, a little cad yellow light. I have 3 colors here that I just use for special touches. Cobalt teal, this is permanent green light, and a new color I'm trying out, cobalt turquoise. Okay, so we'll get started. I'm taking some cerulean blue here, and I want a light value, just a light wash over the part that's in the sky. And then right away, yellow ochre is the underpainting for the building. I've kind of identified basically the yellow range, yellow ochre and that, as sort of the mother color for the whole painting. Little alizarin crimson in there. So now the next section here is the real star of the show. So I really want these, I want them to be light, but I want them to have be quite strong, these awnings. And just carrying that down to the part under the awning. Okay, I'm cutting around the figures. Okay, and then now carry this down with the fence. And I'm taking some of this neutral tint, which is actually quite a nice pavement color. That stroke was a little dry there, so I got a streak. But when it's dry, it'll be fine. Just dried it off. So just kind of a grayish mixture. Fairly light value for the roof. Now the side of the bar. And I'm leaving just the highlight part of these umbrellas. And sort of bluing off that mixture. For this sort of bit of a roof. Yeah, I'm just trying to blend things in. It's looking really cut out. So this part here is quite a dark. And then there's a patch of the yellow showing through. And then we get into one of the stronger darks. This is the shadow under whatever that thing is. A bit of the top floor there. And then the shadow on the awning is just a slightly lighter value than that shadow under it. I'm trying to give it an interesting shape. The thing is, I want to do it and leave it. So it's a one-time thing. So if I want to adjust it at all, I have to do it now while it's wet. Now the space under the umbrellas, it's basically all mid-value and darker. So I'm kind of putting the mid-value on. And then later I'll start throwing some darker values into it while it's still wet. I'm really trying to keep the paper active by keeping it wet, which is sometimes a challenge when you're going around figures. So you want to make sure that there's enough water in that mix so that it's wet enough. Okay, so now I've got some darker value here. So this bright yellowish awning has actually a black flap on it. or dark flap. But the sort of the darks under there are even darker than that black fringe. So I'm just dropping in sort of random strokes of darker mixtures. I'm just trying not to cover everything because I want some of that first wash to show through. So this is certainly starting to draw your eye to the space under the awning. Okay, so I'm doing the tree on this side, starting with the light wash, knowing I'm going to add darks into that. And I like this squirrel mop brush. You can actually twist it like that to splay out the hairs, and it can sometimes give you interesting shapes. So this is all just the light value part of the tree. Lighting, getting into a bit of middle value. You know, just some suggested detail along the edge. And now I'm going for the darker values. And it's much easier to do all of this in one go while it's wet. I just seem to need a little bit of light in it. So I'm doing the fence now, and it's quite dark. And what I'm trying to do is, you know, I know it's all railings, but I just want to suggest some of these railings. Otherwise, it's just way too busy. So I want areas where you're just sort of seeing blobs of color, and then some of these suggestions of the railings. Very useful way to use the brush is to just really push the hairs right into the paper. Then you can start getting strokes that have a lot of character with them, to them. Especially if you're trying to, you know, fill a large area. So while it's still wet, I want to connect it right away into the shadows. And these sort of the light holes in there, the reflection of the railings, you know, with the light popping through, very effective. Okay, really using some dry brush type strokes, side of the brush, and etc. Trying to recreate that sort of dappled light effect. Dry it off. Now I need to have more detail, more contrast in the upper part here. And trying as much as possible to connect shapes. And just dropping in some darker values here and there. Same idea, you know, some suggested detail. Again, a little bit stronger value. It's actually quite similar. Oh, that is. Now doing the underneath of the umbrellas, I'm putting a dark valued mixture here, but into this dark value I'm going to float some other colors to get some, to make it more interesting under there. And same thing on this umbrella. And some even darker values, just, you know, to create interest in that area. And again, when I leave some of the sort of that first wash showing through, you get some really nice contrast. And when you have contrast, it's an interesting area for the eye to travel to. Just tidying things up a little bit in there. Now starting on the figures, and so I'm taking Cad Orange here for the face. And I find alizarin and burnt sienna, something like that, a real dark mixture. I find is good for the hair. Yeah, so I'm taking a alizarin crimson burnt sienna mixture, very dark, very little water, and it's a good one for hair. And by the placement of the hair, you can have the head turned one way or the other. Okay, now I'm taking Chinese white, which is just used to make it opaque. So this will be it'll be like a strong mixture, good covering power, but it's a light value. A little more Chinese white. So the center of interest is starting to develop nicely. The figure on the left there looks like he's using a crutch, very, very awkward shape, but I'll live with it. Now, right under this overhang here is it's the dark, or the next value of darkness. This dark shadow under this overhang is it's a very strong value, second only to under the awnings. So I'm trying to use a wet and wet approach here to sort of start to suggest detail, but not make it overpowering. So I want you to think there's something going on up there, but I don't want you to take away from the center of interest. Yeah, and these flowers in the photo, they were some of the whitest whites, but I don't want them to be that predominant, so I'm kind of toning them all down. And when you have a section that's wet and you want to maintain some definition in your strokes, you need to make sure that your brush is drier than the paper. There's less water on your brush than the paper. In other words, more pigment. Okay, this is something I almost always do. Just little dabs of pure Cad Red light, just to make it an interesting surface, so that you're, to give your eye reasons to travel around a bit. And then yellow ochre and Chinese white to kind of do the lettering on there. I'm not trying to write anything, just have little strokes that look like letters. And the part I always love, straight out of the tube, Chinese white for the sun hitting these figures. Just brings them to life. Yeah, this figure here got problems. Yeah, don't want to play around too much with these little shapes, because if you go too much, then it just becomes too busy. Okay, here I critique the picture, and I notice this spot here seems a little too busy. I think I need to do something with that. And that roof line, yeah, I just really don't like that. It's too sharp against the background. It's not the effect I want at all. I need to really soften that. And another thing I notice is this tree blends too much. I think what I'd like to do is bring some of it a little bit forward. So I want some more Chinese white. That might be too much. That might be better. Decided I'm going to stop here. My goal was to capture a sense of light, and I certainly think it has that. That made a huge difference in my mind to really bring the attention back down here. Much more comfortable with that. So yeah, I'm fine with it. I think it has that sense of light, so I will say successful. even though I'll probably keep playing with it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and until next time, happy painting, and thanks to everyone who has subscribed. Because another thing I noticed, big difference, is this figure was dark against the dark background there, so it was a real muddy section. So I lifted it out, took my brush with just water, lifted it out. You can see it a bit behind it. Then I want to have light, so I'm putting some legs. So he's got shorts on, and I want to get some out into here. Something like that. Now that brings a sense of light to that. Might even exaggerate it a little bit.